Breaking, the NLRB has ruled that if bosses commit unfair labor practices in the run-up to a union election, then the election will be canceled and the board will order the employer to immediately recognize and bargain with the union. Union busting just got a lot harder. Now, every union campaign has to go through an election to get formal recognition, but bosses use that time to union bust, often illegally. Now, if a majority of workers support the union, bosses will have to stop union busting or be forced to negotiate with no election at all. As the chair of the NLRB says, oh God, there's 0% chance, dude. The Supreme Court is going to fucking make mincemeat out of this. It eliminates incentives for employers to commit unfair labor practices as a way to delay defeat representation when a majority of workers have shown support for a union. This brings the board's position closer to the old Joy Silk doctrine, which held that if a majority of workers signed union cards, there didn't need to be an election at all, and bosses just had to recognize the union and bargain in good faith. Somewhere out there, Cenk is very upset about this decision. Listen, I had to do it to him one time, okay? But that is kind of what he did a little bit. I mean, TYT is union, so they have a union now, so.
The National Labor Relations Board is expected to soon issue a major legal decision that would give workers a significantly stronger voice in the workplace. That decision, which could reestablish a policy called the Joy Silk Doctrine, could make it considerably easier for workers to organize for better pay and benefits. Let me explain. As we know, public support for unions is very high, highest level in more than 50 years. Indeed, we've witnessed an extraordinary wave of unionization efforts at Starbucks, Amazon, Trader Joe's, REI, Chipotle, Apple stores, and many other places. Unfortunately, this enthusiasm for unionizing has been met by a powerful flood of union busting. Starbucks, Amazon, and many other companies have mounted high-pressure campaigns that aim to stifle workers' voices and prevent democracy in the workplace. Campaigns that are meant to scare workers about unions and pressure them to vote against unionizing. To beat back unions, corporate executives and their high-paid consultants often use egregious, hardball tactics like firing pro-union workers, herding workers into anti-union propaganda meetings, and warning workers that their workplace might shut down if they vote to unionize. As I explain in my book, Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor, all too often, when companies fight against unionization, they violate federal law. Although it's illegal for an employer like Starbucks to fire a worker for supporting a union, Starbucks has fired over 100 pro-union employees. One study found that employers fire nearly 1 in 5 rank-and-file workers who lead unionization drives. Many corporations believe they have a bright green light to engage in rampant anti-union illegalities because federal law doesn't allow for employers to be fined, not even 1 cent, for illegally firing pro-union workers or for other labor law violations. Jennifer Abruzzo, the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board, is very upset about all this anti-union law-breaking by employers and about how that law-breaking often helps beat back union drives.
I have found over 2 decades at the agency, employers will engage in unfair labor practices during the critical period being between the petition filing and the election being conducted. They want time to coerce and intimidate workers to not vote for the union.
Abruzzo is eager to do what she can to fix this. So at a time when union busting is far too prevalent, Abruzzo is pushing for a policy that would make it considerably easier for workers to unionize while also enabling them to unionize without having to face employers' fierce, weeks-long, often illegal anti-union campaigns. Abruzzo has called for the NLRB to adopt a former labor board policy and bargain with the union unless the employer shows it has a good faith doubt about the legitimacy of the union's majority status.
Oh my God, is this
Under
from
Joy
right now?
Silk, if a company refused to bargain when it didn't have a good faith doubt about a union's majority status, the NLRB would order the company to recognize and begin bargaining with the union. Over the years, the NLRB and federal courts have moved away from Joy Silk. As a result, unionizing by card check, which is often called majority sign-up, is much rarer because employers now routinely refuse to recognize card checks. They no longer need any reason for rejecting card check. They need not show any good faith doubt. Instead, employers can insist on having workers vote in a secret ballot election about whether they want a union, a move that usually gives employers weeks or even months to mount a vigorous anti-union campaign and prevent a truly free choice by workers. Doctrine. The name Joyce Silk comes from a 1949 case in which the National Labor Relations Board ruled that when a union presents authorization cards signed by a majority of a workplace's employees, the employer must recognize. Councilor Abruzzo has asked the full 5-member board in Washington to reestablish Joyce Silk as official policy. In her brief in that case, Abruzzo wrote that after the labor board replaced Joyce Silk with a system.
So here's what's going on. This is similar to a bill that was supposed to pass under the Obama administration, something that he actually advocated for when he was campaigning and then quickly reneged on and quietly stopped advocating for. What is it called? Employee Free Choice Act. Yeah, here. President Barack Obama not only supported the bill, but an original co-sponsor of the Employee Choice Act. Obama urged his Senate colleagues to pass the bill during a 2007 motion to proceed, where he said, "I support this bill because in order to restore a sense of shared prosperity and security, we need to help working Americans exercise their right to organize under a fair and free process and bargain for their fair share of the wealth our country creates. The current process for organizing a workplace denies too many workers the ability to do so." I love this guy thinking this is an own. Look. First he said, "They're taking jobs away from Chinese people. I thought you preferred China to America. Why would you want our jobs to stay here? Are the Chinese factories that opened up in America unionized?" I don't know if you understand this, but that is not the own that you think it is. That means that America's labor force has been so thoroughly eviscerated and our workplace safety measures, our labor power is so that China, in an effort to do some marketing, like marginal marketing, can open up a facility in America without too much of a hit on their own manufacturing capabilities. You get that, right? How do you look at a situation like that and go, wow, this is really fucked up? Why wouldn't they want what's best for workers if they're communists? I love the notion that China is ideologically invested in having communism be implemented in America, and that's why they have the American factories that they opened up, and not because they want to do marketing. Or the notion that I think that they are doing that. You just came in here with your own conclusions. I never said that. The fuck? So what's your counter to that? You have been owned by a Loretted army, good sir. They don't even care about unions and you think they're socialist, Lamau. First of all, when have I ever said that China is like abiding by Marxist principles ever? Like ever. When have I ever said that? Also, are unions even socialist? Do you think I think that unions are socialist? Do you think unions are socialism? Is that what you think I think? Wait, China doesn't have unions? What the fuck? You lied to me? I never said China has unions. First of all, every factory worker in China is absolutely a part of the party, and technically they're unionized, but that doesn't mean anything. It's just everyone is a part of the union if they're working, but that doesn't really mean that they get all the benefit. They are part of a process to socialism. They are a part of the process of socialism, obviously, so they're anti-communist. Can we pass a law to take keyboards away from 15-year-olds? Yeah, but then we can't have fun like this chatter is engaging in. Unions are not socialist? No, of course unions are not socialist. What the fuck? Wait, they're not? Now I'm confused. Guys, unions are not socialism, okay? Unions are just right, okay? Unions are fair. There are plenty of countries all around the world that have unions. None of them are socialist. What are we talking about? Unions simply are a fair way to bargain collectively with your bosses that currently have all the power and the means of production, and also dictate profit margins, which means that they can lower your wages any which way they want to. Unions are a tool for rights and democratic power. They are not defined by ideology. Exactly. Unions can be a pathway towards socialism if you want to cut it that way, but that doesn't mean that they are socialism, okay? I feel like you are going to keep throwing more question marks. There's a lot that you don't understand, my friend. Unions are built on similar principles to socialism, but unions are not socialism. You understand that many unions are corrupt and racist, right, Mr. Piker? Yeah, as opposed to like capital owners who are famously not corrupt nor racist at all. I have often said that regardless of whatever historical unions have experienced, or whatever historical unions have engaged in, exclusion of black labor force participants, for example. Currently in the United States of America, one fun fact is that the black union labor participation is unironically higher than white labor union participation. That's number one. Number two, as far as like the entire white working class versus the black working class, there is a higher percentage of black workers in labor unions than there are white workers in labor unions. So that's one. Number two, regardless of whether you say unions are corrupt or whatever, unions and the way that they exist and the reasons for why they exist is so that there is a vehicle to bargain with capital owners. They're a vehicle to bargain with your bosses. So I would rather, if corruption is an inevitability, I would rather have a vehicle for bargaining that has demonstrably delivered results for the American labor force that is both unionized and even non-unionized, as a matter of fact, than just simply having an authoritarian dictatorship style structure in the corporate workforce where your bosses just dictate the terms of your existence without any consideration. We sit around and hope, like a bunch of brain dead peasants in the medieval era, that like maybe they will be kind out of the kindness of their hearts. Hasan's a Bolshevik, so of course he's against unions. Read Maurice Britton's Worker Control. My man said Hasan's a Bolshevik. Also, I'm not against unions. I've never been against unions, and I've probably done a lot more for unions than you have, chatter, who's chirping in here. The Employee Free Choice Act offers to make binding an alternative process under which the majority of employees can sign up to join a union. Currently, employers can choose to accept, but are not bound by law to accept, the signed decision of a majority of workers. And Barack Obama straight up said that at a labor federation meeting, that he will make this the law of the land when he's the president of the United States of America. In 2010, he vowed to keep fighting for the bill, and he stopped. You have a very cynical view of the world. What? I assume you're fucking writing this from Mars, I guess. What is happening right now?
To reject card check and insist on elections. The Commission of Unfair Labor Practices during election campaigns, including unfair discharges, increased dramatically. In turn, the number of elections fell precipitously, and as a result, the rate of unionization now rests near all-time lows. In the CMEX case, currently before the Labor Board, the Teamsters Union launched a campaign to organize ready-mix concrete drivers in Las Vegas and Southern California. The Teamsters presented the company with signed authorization cards from 207 of the unit's 366 employees, nearly 57% of the workers. But instead of voluntarily recognizing the union, the employer, as so many corporations do nowadays, demanded an election vote and immediately engaged in illegal, unfair labor practices with the aim of reducing worker support for the union. An NLRB judge found that CMEX had illegally fired a union supporter, illegally spied on union activities, and illegally threatened to close operations, discharge workers, or reduce workers' benefits if they voted to unionize. Finally, after the employer engaged in its intense union-busting campaign, the drivers voted narrowly against unionizing, 166 to 179. In a far-reaching study, Kate Bronfenbrenner, a labor researcher at Cornell University, found that heavy-handed union-busting tactics, like those used by CMEX, are far too common. She found that 85% of employers force workers to attend mandatory captive audience meetings. 71% of employers have supervisors regularly talk with workers one-on-one about the union campaign. 45% of employers threaten workers with plant closing, outsourcing, or contracting out their work, and 16% of employers fire union activists. In her brief in the CMEX case, Abruzzo argued that if the Labor Board adopts the Joy-Silk doctrine, that would greatly improve workers' ability to organize. Under Joy-Silk, she wrote, if an employer violated the law in fighting against unionization, that will demonstrate its lack of good faith in doubting the union's majority. The Joy-Silk doctrine would create a much clearer and easier route for workers to unionize through card check. Ask any union.
I feel like the Supreme Court will take on any fucking solid case that will eviscerate this, but
leader
you know,
or organizer, and they'll tell you it's
hopefully
far
not.
easier, faster, and less expensive to unionize through card check than through a union election when employers mount ferocious union-busting campaigns. Right now, what millions of American workers want is to unionize and collectively bargain with their employers. Workers don't want to face a gauntlet of firings and other tactics meant to intimidate them, frighten them, and undermine their free choice. Joyce Silk would make it far easier for workers who want a union to get one. And doing so, allowing workers free choice and a stronger voice, would help reignite American workers with a real sense of democratic values and our nation at a time when our democracy and our democratic values are under serious attack.
Yeah, there's more. There's additional good news. GM Ultium UAW battery workers won a 25% pay increase. In other good news, unions get the goods. This was also great. The IRA also has kickstarted a lot of battery manufacturing plants here in the United States, and including EV factories as well. So shouts out to that aspect of the IRA.
That is called the Joyce Silk.
Now, obviously, what they should have done was also ensured provisions that those factories were union factories, because it's, these are federal government subsidies that they are giving, right? So they have every right to make these demands, in my opinion.